Thank you all for being here today. And before we begin, I first want to begin by addressing the heinous attacks that happened to Congressman Connolly's district office today. I did put a call into the congressman to check on his staff members. We are all praying for the quick recovery for the staffers injured and grateful for the quick actions of the law enforcement who apprehended the suspect. Last week, the House Republicans went to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C. to pay our respects to the officers who lost their lives in the line of duty. Today, at the National Police Week begins, we continue to show our full support of our police officers by saying thank you. Thank you to everyone who wears the badge. Our nation is blessed to have the bravest, most professional, most capable officers in the world. For those protectors of peace, stopping criminals, saving innocent lives, and helping our communities is more than a job. It's a way of life. And as you sit and talk, we have many who were officers before they took the job as members of Congress. They know firsthand what it's like to walk out the door. And they've had friends not come back. We have members who were officers who were actually shot in the line of duty and continue to be able to serve. We know each and every day that we've watched the rhetoric in this nation move when the Democrats' majority of defunding the police. We now see that a number of members that serve as officers look to retire. And the one thing about serving in law enforcement is not a job, it is a way of life. And many times it follows from generation to generation. But now when you speak to those who wear the blue, they openly talk about maybe it's not a job for their children to do. We need to show the respect, we need to show the funding, and we need to stand up for the law enforcement officers to make sure that they can continue to do the job to keep our streets safe. We've watched what this movement from the Democrats of defunding the police have done to our cities. I come from California. I watched the former speaker's city of San Francisco to be nothing what the city once was. I watched Nordstrom's close their stores. I watched grocery stores that pride themselves on opening up have to close because of the robberies or the drugs on the streets, that even the governor is now calling in the National Guard. We don't want San Francisco to be the cities across this country. We want to change the course of history, and that's exactly what this conference will do. With that, I want to call up our majority leader, who knows firsthand what it's like if someone comes forth. He would not be here today to serve if it wasn't for the law enforcement, risking their lives, not just to defend his, but to everybody else on that baseball field that day. Let's, for Steve Scalise.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And every single day, I pray for our men and women in law enforcement. It is never lost on me that I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the bravery and heroism of those brave men and women in uniform. Of course, David Bailey and Crystal Griner with Capitol Police were with me that day of the shooting back in 2017. It wasn't just me. It was about a dozen other members of Congress that wouldn't be here either if they didn't step up and do what men and women in uniform do every single day. They take an oath to keep our communities safe. You know, they don't know any given day if when they walk out the door, they might encounter danger, they might be apprehending somebody who committed violence against someone else. They don't know, it might be a slow day, but it also might be a day where their life is in danger, and yet they show up every single day and they do that job. They have our backs every single day, and it's important that we have their backs every single day. That's what a week like this is about, to pay tribute to law enforcement, to take an extra moment to thank them. If you see a cop, thank them for their job, because I know I pray for them that not only they're able to do their job safely, but they're able to return home to their families, because they are fathers and mothers, their sons and daughters, and their families want to see them come home safe as well. That's why this week we're bringing a number of bills to the floor during this special week to pay tribute to law enforcement, to show them that we have their back in a number of different ways. Hopefully these are all very bipartisan votes, votes that stand up for law enforcement, but also stand up against the attacks on law enforcement. You've seen the defund the police movement. It's still out there. But you also see de facto defunding of the police. You see attempts by some of these prosecutors who run on a platform of not enforcing laws to hold people accountable who are caught by police. There's nothing more demoralizing to a police officer if they chase down a suspect. Sometimes you're getting into fist fights. You're actually having to run them down, and then you catch somebody who did something bad to somebody else only to watch them walk out the door the next day. We saw that happening here in D.C., and we took action in our first weeks in the majority to say at least we have a constitutional ability to do something about it in D.C. And we said if somebody commits a violent crime, they're not going to walk out of jail the next day like D.C. was trying to do. And we passed that bill and it got signed into law. And this is something telling. The D.C. police chief, as this debate was playing out, said something that should remind everybody why the defund the police movement is dangerous, why cashless bail is dangerous, why this attitude that if you catch somebody, you can just let them out the next day is dangerous. Because the police chief in D.C., during that debate just a few months ago, said for every person they catch who committed murder, that person committed 11 other crimes before they committed murder. We shouldn't stop and put somebody in jail only when they commit a murder. If you can put them in jail the first time they harm somebody, they won't commit that murder. That's what we're standing up for when we're standing up for our men and women in uniform. Because unfortunately, sometimes those murders are the police officers themselves. Last year, we lost over 200 men and women in uniform in the United States of America who were just doing their jobs and were killed in the line of duty. It's a dangerous job on a good day. And on a bad day, there's some that don't make it home. And we never forget those families. We never stop praying for our men and women in uniform who keep our communities safe. God bless each and every one of them. We should all be there to back them as they do their job to back us. And with that, I'd like to bring up our whip, Mr. Tom Emmer.
Thank you, Steve. Going off that 200 number that you just gave, 135 police officers have been shot in the line of duty so far just this year. Of those, 15 were killed by gunfire. An officer in my home state of Minnesota was killed just last month after being shot 3 times while responding to a domestic violence call. But instead of backing the brave men and women in blue who place themselves in harm's way to keep our communities safe, Democrats continue to cave to the leftist lunacy that has made them the most anti-law enforcement party in our history. We see the repercussions of their lawless policies on our streets every day. Crime is soaring in communities across this country, with homicides spiking 13% over the past 2 years. Incidents of rape have increased by 23.5%, and aggravated assaults skyrocketed by nearly 34%. But unfortunately, Democrats continue to double down on their pro-crime agenda. Just 2 short months ago, 173 House Democrats voted against bipartisan legislation that overturned the D.C. City Council's radical criminal code overhaul and forced even Joe Biden to admit the Democrat-run city has a crime issue. Our police departments are struggling to recruit and retain officers as it is, and they're looking to us for help. We can start by doing more to defend them rather than defund them. This National Police Week, House Republicans will pass 3 pieces of legislation that send a message of support to our men and women in blue and give them the resources they need to keep our communities safe, and themselves, by the way, safe. After the countless hours these officers have committed to an often thankless job, this is the least that we can do. I hope and pray that our colleagues on the other side of the aisle will put their politics aside and vote yes on these bills that prioritize the safety of our constituents by backing the blue. And with that, I turn it over to our conference chair, Elise Stefan.
Well, thank you, Tom. It's a privilege to be here today for National Police Week. As the representative for New York's 21st Congressional District, I am proud to represent thousands of brave law enforcement officers who put their lives on the line to protect our upstate New York and North Country communities every day, 24/7. And I am always proud to back the blue. The Republican Party is the party of law and order, and this week we will consider several bills supporting our local law enforcement, including the Police Act of 2023, which was introduced by my fellow New Yorker, Congressman Andrew Garbarino. With the historic humanitarian, economic, and national security crisis occurring along our southern and northern border and the crime crisis across America, Congressman Garbarino's legislation holds illegal immigrants accountable for violence against law enforcement officers by making assaults against an officer a deportable offense. Violent crime has skyrocketed in New York and across the country, and the American people know this is because of the far left's defund the police movement and disastrous policies like we have in New York State failed bail reform. It's one of the reasons why we won the majority, because we are pro-law and order when it comes to the New York Republicans here today. House Republicans will always and proudly back the blue. And this week, we are standing up to the Democrats' dangerous anti-police agenda. And I'm so honored that in our conference, we have many retired law enforcement officers who bring their experience and expertise to the halls of Congress every single day. And I want to introduce one of those, Clay Higgins from Louisiana.
I thank you all for being here, my colleagues, as we reflect upon the service that the Thin Blue Line provides to our nation. It's important that we remember that police officers are human beings. I was a military police officer in the Army and civilian cop for many years, patrol most of those years, SWAT operator for 12 years. For 8 of those years, I worked night shift. My wife and I would have a brief period of time when she returned home from work before I left. We had a little ceremony, and she would tell me goodbye for the evening. She'd say, "Be safe and come home." And I would tell her, "Don't worry about me, worry about the other guy." That was our little exchange, but it was in recognition to the clear fact that I might not come home. You see, ladies and gentlemen, when you put on a badge to serve your community, you're putting yourself in harm's way purposefully in defense of your community. So this week, when we honor my brothers and sisters of the Thin Blue Line as a nation, I ask you all to just reflect upon that simple fact. These men and women are American human beings with families, and they're serving their community because they want to, not because they have to. They feel driven to serve in such a manner. And I have a brief message for our communities from sea to shining sea. You government officials, let your police officers, let professional law enforcement do their job. Just let them do their job. Support them as they serve. And you district attorneys and prosecutors, when you have a righteous case presented to your office, prosecute. Do your job. It's a simple formula that if we'll follow as a nation, this trend of horrific crime that we're seeing across our country will begin to decline. As we rise, crime will fall. I thank you all for being here, and I'm honored to introduce my colleague, Pete. Where are you, Pete? Hey, come on, brother.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Congressman Pete Stauber. As a former Duluth police officer for 23 years, I understand the sacrifices made every single day by those who wear the uniform to serve and protect our communities. Every day, law enforcement officers walk out of their homes, leaving their loved ones behind, and put their own lives on the line for the safety and security of others. Policing is both a dangerous and noble and honorable profession. That's why it's critical that we have the backs of our brothers and sisters in the blue and brown now more than ever. We must show gratitude for their sacrifice. Far too many people have used anti-police rhetoric, which has led to a huge uptick in violence against law enforcement. We must continue to strongly denounce the reckless and radical defund and disparage the police movement. Our House Republican majority is committed to backing the blue. Republicans don't need election year polling to stand with law enforcement. My time in uniform may be over, but my watch will never end. May God bless all the brave men and women serving our communities. And now it's my honor to introduce Representative Anthony D'Esposito from New York.
Well, thank you, and it is an honor to stand with a conference that I know stands with my brothers and sisters in blue. We started Police Week on Thursday, leaving the steps of the Capitol, led by our great speaker, on a bike tour from the steps of the People's House to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial. And as we rode through the streets of our great capital, we made it clear that we are members that stand with law enforcement. We don't just stand with them when it's beneficial to us. We stand with them 24/7, 365. I visited the memorial many times in my life. And on Thursday, after the bike ride, on Saturday, I shared some time at the vigil with some of my colleagues that are here. Hearing the names of hundreds of men and women from every corner of this nation who made that ultimate sacrifice. They left their loved ones, they suited up, and they went out on the streets, never to return home again. And as we read and recited each and every name that was lost in 2022, I thought about the inscription at the law enforcement memorial. And it was something that I mentioned on Thursday at the bike ride because I think it embodies everything that Police Week is about. And under the lion, it says, "It's not how they died that made them heroes, it's how they lived." And I reflect back on my career in the New York City Police Department, serving as a proud detective. And I think back to the night with just under a year on patrol and hearing Russell Timoshenko in Brooklyn South putting over a car stop for a car that was stolen. And as they exited the vehicle, it took fire. Both him and his partner shot, and his partner screaming in the radio that they were taking fire. Russell's family immigrated here. They volunteered at their local church. He was the first person in his family to serve as law enforcement, gunned down in the streets of New York City because he wore a uniform. I think about Mia Soto's familia, who was shot point-blank range into her patrol car because she wore a uniform. She was a single mother. And yesterday, her children and grandchildren celebrated another Mother's Day without her. It wasn't about how she died, it was about how she lived. I think about Stephen McDonald. Many of you have heard his story, and I shared it the other day, but it's one to hear again. Stephen McDonald was born and raised on Long Island, lived in my district. And he was a young cop in Central Park, shot in the head at point-blank range by young thugs. He survived and spent his life promoting peace and promoting forgiveness. And years back, after a long fight and battle, he returned home, eventually losing his life from the gunshot wounds that day. But it wasn't about how he died, it was about how he lived. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we talk about Police Week, yes, we should back the blue. Yes, every member of the United States House of Representatives should be supporting the bills that are on the floor this week. But we know they won't, because some of them are cowards, and they don't want to stand up and say that they support the police. They want to defund law enforcement. They want to see drugs and violence reign our streets. But that's not the country that we believe in. That's not the country that so many people gave their lives for. And that's why we, as a conference, are going to keep fighting. So use this week, Police Week, to remember those who have made the ultimate sacrifice and think about that inscription on the wall. It's not how they died that made them heroes, it's how they lived. The New York City Police Department has a motto, Fidelis ad mortem, faithful unto death. Every member of law enforcement on that memorial that many of us will visit this week, they remained Fidelis ad mortem. I'd now like to turn it over to Representative Mike Ezell.
Thank you. And thank you all for coming out here tonight. I want to thank the leadership in this House. Every one of you, every member in this House, you have shown nothing but support for our law enforcement since I have walked in here day one. I spent 42 years in police service, and I tell you, if I had to do it all over again, I'd do it again. Today is Peace Officers Memorial Day. Too many times over my 42-year career, I have had to go and visit a grave site. I have had to go and see widows. I have had to spend time with people that have lost their family members. And let me tell you something, that's not something easy to do. But these men and women that have given their life up for the service of others so that you can sleep peacefully each night, they do that because they love this country. They love their community. They love their family, and they want better for you and for the safety of you and your family. I ask each and every one of you today, if you don't know a cop, find one. Get to know them, and you'll see just what kind of person they really are. They love people, they love serving, and they are the guy that shows up at 2 o'clock in the morning when it's pouring down rain and there's nobody else to call. You call the police. So the next time you think that you want to say something negative about a police officer, think about who you're going to call when things are all gone wrong. You call your local police. Again, I cannot thank this leadership enough for the way that you have treated me since I have been here. God bless America. God bless our police officers. Thank you.
I feel very honored to serve in a group that a number have served. Pete Stauber, he didn't tell you, he was wounded in his line of work. It wasn't a small shot. He got shot in the head, went back to do the job. D'Esposito, passion from the heart. He didn't show you the ring that he wears, but he never forgets the detective has never left his life. When we were at the memorial, we laid a wreath, and he talked the stories just what he talked here. I went over to lay a wreath for the Kern County Sheriff Officer, Philip Campus. He went to the same elementary school, same junior high as I did. I was a little older than him. He was 2 young kids, talked to his wife just last week. He was on the SWAT team. And it's not a job. When I sat with the SWAT team, they went to a call, domestic dispute. father killing his family. He didn't wait around till it was safe for him to get out. He got out, saved a few family members, but gave his life doing it. His wife said, "Thank you for never forgetting." And that's really, we had a change in election. I hope you feel the change in Congress. That's what this is about. This is 1 week, but it's every day. And we walk across this country, I think you see it time and again. For every place that wanted to defund the police, you know they regret it. Doesn't matter where you live in the community, you want to be safe. We're hopeful we can change the turn of what the damage they have done, and that's what this is all about. With that, I'm going to give CNN the first question because they were here early.
Thank you. I mean, your calls to fly back to blue. Do you believe the actions taken by the U.S. Capitol police officer who shot Ashley Babbitt were appropriate, or do you think that he was acting like a thug in the words of the former president?
Well, you've asked me this question before, and we've answered it many times there. When you look at it, he had a job to defend this Capitol, and that's what he was going through doing, yes.
Can I get two questions, one on this, one on another?
You were late, but okay.
On this topic, do you support giving line-of-duty benefits to police officers who die by suicide in uniform?
Well, most police officers are not federal police officers. They're in working for the city and the counties, and they usually make that decision. But we see the job time and again, especially when people are out there saying defunding the police, the suicide that is happening and rampant throughout. I think we need to make sure we're interjecting to protect these individuals not to have the suicide. So from a federal end, it's not a place that we vote on, but from a state level. But I think from a federal end, we should be looking at this, and it's also coming in when you think about law enforcement. If you've been to the border, our border agents, suicide is up high because the pressure they're under, the job they're not able to do, where they're being put off. I was just down there a couple months ago, and it was one of the #1 topics that another suicide had happened that day. I think we've got to start looking at how can we interact earlier to protect them. On our own Capitol police officers, I would go bike riding with a number of them, and suicide is high within our own Capitol Police. So yes, I would seriously look at that because it's a part of the line of the duty.
Great. And second question, would you say that President Biden is now negotiating on the debt limit?
Well, let's just look at the facts. We have a meeting tomorrow with the 4 leaders talking about the debt ceiling. We'll have staff in a room talking about the debt ceiling. I don't know what he calls that, but everybody else would call it negotiating.
Do you have, just now that these meetings have broken up for the day, or close to, do you have any update on how you feel about negotiations?
Look, if we were sitting in the room that we were today and it was February, I'd feel good about it. We just had our secretary say June 1st we could run out of money. We only have so many days left. The president decided to wait 100 days before he would negotiate. He treated this the same way he treated the border. He wanted to ignore the problem. When I became speaker, one of the first things I requested is a meeting with the president. And I only got the meeting on February 1st. And I wanted to sit down with him to talk about how could we solve the debt ceiling problem, curve the way we've been spending money, find places we can save for the taxpayers. I mean, who would think if you appropriated COVID money that sat there for 2 years, that you passed the bill that the pandemic is over, that you could pull that money back with savings? What about growing our economy? Instead of watching our energy bills go up and the stock market go down, what about having the stock market go up where retirement accounts go higher, where you have more money in your pocket because your energy costs are less? What about the idea of helping people get back into the workforce because the supply chain will be better, the work requirements, helping people work? All of that I felt would be very positive. I talked to the president about it back then. He wanted to ignore us. And the only body in all of Congress are the Republicans who raised the debt ceiling. And we did it way in advance before Janet Yellen told us when the deadline was, because we didn't want to be here. So no, I don't think we're in a good place. I know we're not. This ignoring the problem, thinking it's going to go away, he could bumble his way just into a default like he did on the border. That's what we didn't want to have happen. So we raised the debt limit. We're protecting. I don't know, maybe his secret plan is to wait till the last minute and pass our bill. I'm okay with that.
What does this meeting tomorrow, what does a successful meeting look like to you? What would need to happen to make you feel a little bit better about it?
They would have to get serious about negotiating. They would have to really talk about where they're going to go. Look, the way the founders designed this whole government, the House takes an action, the Senate takes an action, you go to conference, the president decides he's going to sign it. Unfortunately, only one house has taken action. But it seems to be a continual pattern. When D.C. wanted to decriminalize all the actions, the House took an action, the president said he'd veto it, 170-some Democrats voted against it, and then it passed the Senate against Schumer's beliefs, and the president signed it. When we had a border with Title 42 going to be lifted, they ignored the problem, the House again took action. We're looking for solutions, but we'd really like somebody to work with us instead of against us. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the border.
Yes.
Some members of the conference have expressed support for including border security measures within the debt ceiling bills. That's something you support?
Look, I think the president, I told him early on, if he finds some other policies that we can put in to make the country safer, make it stronger, I'm more than willing to talk about that. I'm just not sure in the Senate, they haven't passed anything, but I can't say that. They did name March Maine Maple Syrup Month. So if Schumer needs to put that into, I'll look the other way.
Do you think it's time for the discussions to be narrowed?
Yes. Look, if you look at, we all know how this works. When President Trump was in office and Nancy Pelosi would not pass a clean debt ceiling, when she said their party would not do it, he assigned Mnuchin, and then they negotiated. Same thing with President Bush, same thing with Obama. Unfortunately, here is the way the president has ignored it for 100 days, and then he still hasn't taken it serious. We only have so many days left in session to deal with this.
So you would like bilateral talks between you and the president without...
You know, I haven't hid from that. That's been from the very first day. When I went to meet with the president, it was the president and I. If the president comes to an agreement, the Democrats in the Senate will vote for it. The House will pass it if we are all in agreement. Why do we waste more time going around and around, not solving any of the real problems? I think you're putting the country in jeopardy when you do that. Yes, ma'am.
President Biden is scheduled to go to Japan and Australia later this week. He's leaving on later this week. Do you think you should still go in light of where negotiations are?
Look, I think an American president should focus on the solutions of America. And I think it shows your values and your priorities. I just watched a border where we didn't focus upon. I watched a debt ceiling come before us that is very serious. I watched this president, when he was senator, vote against debt ceilings. And he said it didn't go far enough to cut and save. My question to the president is, how big a debt is too big? Is $32 trillion, if that's not big enough, that's bigger than our entire economy. And this whole time he wouldn't talk to me for 100 days, you know what happened? If you look at the Congressional Budget Office, our debt went up $100 billion more. How much more do you want to charge every new child born in America? Is $100,000 enough? How much do you want to indebt the next generation? Because he wants to spend more money we spent during the pandemic. He looks at the next 10 years. We will pay $10.5 trillion in interest. But historically, since 1940 until today, those 83 years, we only paid $9 trillion. He wants to continue to spend the next generation's money. So the real question is, what will he prioritize? What are his values? And how much is too much? You know, what was interesting, I've been through a lot of hearings as members of Congress, and I remember years ago, the Joint Chief came to a hearing, and they asked him, what is the greatest threat to our nation? He didn't say Russia. He didn't say China. You know what he said? Our debt. Every great society has collapsed when they've overextended themselves. And can you seriously look, and I asked the president this, can you tell me, do you not believe there's not one thing in all the spending that we spend that we can't save? How long has he argued with me that money that has sat there for more than 2 years that we spent on COVID, that the pandemic is over, that we can't bring it back to the taxpayer. You know, everybody else is back to work. In the House, we passed the bill to have the federal employees to come back to work. He wants to veto it. He's fighting why every other American goes back to work. He signed a bill that the pandemic's over, and we have half of the federal employees not showing up for work. I don't know how you look at a hardworking taxpayer and look them in the eye and say you're doing a good job or you're focused on solutions for America. Look, there's a lot of problems around the world, but we got a really big problem right here, and I think it takes everybody's attention to get it done. You already asked too. I'll come back, yes.
You sort of alluded to it, but you believe that President Biden is negotiating with you. Some of the conservatives in your party say that they don't want any negotiated bill that less than what can pass. Are you concerned at all about losing some of their support?
No, I'm really concerned that the Senate hasn't passed anything. I'm really concerned that the president waited 100 days before he'd even talk to us. I'm really concerned about the president's continual spending of what he will do to Medicare and Social Security. I'm really concerned about, instead of the Democrats sitting down, realizing we have a division in government and being honest and adult in discussing this, but simply lying about what we're doing. You'll see tomorrow that no, we don't cut veterans, we actually add money to it. The only veterans got cut was this weekend when they got removed from their hotel rooms. So the president would move those who have crossed into this country illegally and take the rooms away from people who are Bronze Stars, who are Purple Hearts. I think that's wrong. So no, that concerns me. Yes.
When you meet with the president tomorrow, what are your demands or your...
My demands?
Yeah, what's your message going to be to the president tomorrow? What is
Mr. President,
of this meeting?
well, the president's called the meeting. I told the president I'll meet him anytime he wants to. I will tell him is time is of the essence. And it's very simple. We want to limit, save, and grow. We want to limit the outside growth of government because we are growing too big. So you know what? In future, cap what we're spending and put it by 1%. It's not really a Republican idea, Joe Manchin's idea. We want to help people get back into the workforce. So we like work requirements. You know what? When this president was a senator, he voted for work requirements. It's shown statistic after statistic. It puts people back in. It helps them earn more. And you know what? It helps America with our supply chain so we're less dependent upon China. In limiting our spending, it curbs inflation that they created by adding $6 trillion. So let's stop the inflation. Let's make our economy stronger. And let's grow our economy by, we passed the bill H.R. 1 that makes us energy independent. We want to be able to build things again in America. So let's cut the red tape, permitting reform. Instead of just talking about things, let's actually do it. And we only have so many days to get it done. So if we're just going to sit in a room with staffers talking, it's not going to happen. And if that's the pattern he wants to do, you know who gets hurt? The American public, but more importantly, everybody who's on Social Security and everybody who's on Medicare. Because his spending level, what the Congressional Budget Office says, for the first time, he's the first president ever to do this in a 10-year window, that they'll go insolvent. So that's an automatically 20% cut. We don't want that to happen. So you know the good thing about this? In April, the Republicans raised the debt ceiling, curved how much we were spending, and proposed a growth in our government. So you wouldn't sit there at the market every day going down. The market would go up. You'd have more jobs and more people in the workforce, and we'd be less dependent upon China. Thank you all very much.
Good morning, everybody.